As the 21st century began, the Transformers brand found itself needing to switch gears. The underperformance of Beast machines had caused a planned sequel series titled Transtech to be shelved. So at the 11th hour, Robots in Disguise was imported from Japan to fill for time, while Hasbro put their heads together with their Japanese partners Takara, and for the first time, collaborated on a new series that would be released in both their markets simultaneously. The result was the first true, full and proper reboot of the entire Transformers universe, unconnected to the shared world of Generation 1 and the Beast era that the whole of Transformers history up to that point had fitted into, which rode the twin waves of the early 2000s boom in 1980s nostalgia and the rise in popularity of Japanese anime sweeping across children's television. These are the basics on the UNICRON Trilogy. It was in the year 2000 that Hasbro designer Aaron Archer was promoted to lead designer for the Transformers brand, and he played a major role in the planning of this new co-produced series, Transformers Armada. Under Archer's guidance, Armada moved away from the increasing complexity that had been found in the last few years of toys, consisting instead of chunkier, sturdier figures that were easier to transform, and which were all designed around a central play feature, Minicons, tiny transformable robots who could connect to the larger figures and unlock new action features, like hidden weapons and lights and sounds. The story of Armada explained how this long-lost race of small, power-enhancing robots had been lost for centuries, hidden in hibernation on Earth. But upon their awakening, the Autobots and Decepticons came to the planet seeking to acquire their power once more. The series featured several familiar faces from Transformers history, like new incarnations of Optimus Prime, Megatron, and Starscream. But as a total reboot of the Transformers world, its cast was mostly made up of brand new characters. Chief among them, the youthful, hot-headed Autobot Kid Appeal character, Hotshot. Mind you, many of these new characters did reuse the names of older Generation 1 bots, who they otherwise had no connection to, as a way for Hasbro to maintain their trademarks on those names. The series was accompanied by a marketing blitz of media and merchandise the likes of which hadn't been seen since Generation 1. Countless storybooks and activity books, mini-comics packed in with the toys, a board game, a video game. But the two most significant were a comic book series published by Dreamwave Productions and an anime TV series written and produced in Japan by studio Actus Inc. In the tradition of Generation 1, the comic and cartoon existed in separate continuities, each telling their own unique version of the Armada story. The comic hit first, arriving in July of 2002 and taking the #1 spot on the month's sales charts with over 145,000 copies ordered. The series was initially written by Chris Saracini, but as it continued it would be taken over by longtime Transformers comic book author Simon Furman and would feature art from fans-turned-pros Guido Guidi and Don Figueroa. The anime arrived a month later, and was not so warmly received. The cartoon debuted in the US 6 months ahead of Japan, with an English dub featuring returning fan-favourite Beast Wars actors Gary Chalk and David Kaye reprising their roles as Optimus and Megatron. But the dub was produced in such a rush that its hastily translated scripts were often stilted and clumsy, with incorrect character names and even moments of outright nonsense with dialogue that didn't match the action on screen. Added to the show's overall shoddy animation, full of off-model artwork and errors the like of which also hadn't been seen since Generation 1, only a small fraction of which would be cleaned up for the eventual Japanese broadcast, adult fans found the show wanting compared not just to the comic book, but also to the new versions of other major childhood favourites that the 80s nostalgia boom brought about, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Masters of the Universe. But adult fans ain't everything, and the success of Armada was the proof. The series was a huge seller, with figures flying off the shelves at such a rate that Hasbro had to throw in a bunch of recolored Beast Wars toys into the later waves in an attempt to meet the demand for product. The crown jewel of the Armada line was a 16-inch tall figure of the monster planet Unicron, rendered in toy form for the first time since his introduction in 1986's The Transformers the Movie. Unicron was incorporated into the final arcs of both the comic book and the cartoon, the back half of which was much better received than the first, with a key story arc centered on the show's tragic incarnation of Starscream being a standout aspect that Armada would be well remembered for. The Armada toy line, cartoon, and comic wrapped up at the end of 2003 after an 18-month run, segueing immediately into a sequel series, Transformers Energon, that launched at the start of 2004. Taking place 10 years after Armada, the story of Energon saw the Autobots contending with the efforts of the Decepticons and the alien Alpha Quintesson to resurrect Unicron for their own ends, using the titular power source, Energon. The Energon toy line replaced unlockable Minicon play features with a variety of new gimmicks. The Autobots in the line could all combine in various ways, the Decepticons had concealed hyper-mode weapons, and new subgroups, the heroic Omnicons and the evil Terrorcons, came with modular mix-and-match Energon weapons that any figure could wield. In addition to returning cast members from Armada, many of the new characters introduced in Energon were based on classic Generation 1 bots, like Rodimus, Scorponok, Shockwave, Omega Supreme, and more, in celebration of the Transformers franchise's 20th anniversary that year. But unfortunately, the fates weren't kind to Energon's tie-in media. Simon Furman continued to write the comic book, which picked up from where the Armada series had left off, adding future Transformers comic superstar Alex Milne on art duties. But within a year, Dreamwave Productions had gone bankrupt and shut down, leaving the series unfinished. And the anime? Airing virtually simultaneously with its Japanese broadcast, the show's circular plotting, the stiff, expressionless CGI it used for the robot characters, and an English dub that was even more slipshod than Armada's, combined to create a series that's come to widely be considered as the single worst TV show in the history of the Transformers brand. Energon concluded in mid-2005 and was immediately followed by the final chapter of the trilogy, Transformers Cybertron. In this series, a black hole created by the destruction of Unicron threatens the Transformers' homeworld, sending the Autobots on a quest across the universe in search of 4 long-lost Cybertronian colonies, from which they seek to obtain the 4 cyber planet keys needed to awaken the only being with the power to close the black hole, their creator and god, Primus. Each colony planet had a different theme. In addition to vehicles from Cybertron and Earth, there were futuristic racing vehicles from Velocitron, the speed planet, robotic animals from the jungle planet, and colossal machines from Gigantian, the giant planet, making the Cybertron toy line the most diverse of the trilogy. And each figure came with a cyber key that could plug into it to unlock new play features, not unlike Minicons. A counterpoint to Armada's Unicron, the toy line included a huge Primus figure that transformed into Cybertron itself, and at the opposite end of the size spectrum, also debuted the Legends figure range, affordable miniature versions of the line's characters, a tactic that's gone on to become a permanent part of every major Transformers toy line since. Cybertron's tie-in media is where things get a bit complicated. You see, each of the 3 series lasted only a year in Japan versus the year and a half that they ran in Hasbro's markets. Armada in 2003 under the name Micron Legend, Energon in 2004 named Superlink, and the Japanese version of Cybertron, Galaxy Force, in 2005. It had always been the plan for the 3rd series to continue on from the previous 2, but the Galaxy Force anime, produced by animation studio Gonzo rather than Actus like the other 2, didn't follow through on this intent, and instead featured a standalone story that was unconnected to the preceding shows. The English dub of the show tried its best to amend this, tying things back together where it could, but many incongruities were left unaddressed. Though the dub did generally succeed in all other areas, with 6 months of lead time ensuring it was vastly improved over Armada and Energon, with accurate scripts full of lively, flavorful dialogue. With Dreamwave out of business, there was no mass-market Cybertron comic book, but a manga adaptation was published in Japan, though it also wound up cancelled before it reached an ending. And the official Transformers Collectors Club produced several comic strips and prose stories. The club's stories combined elements of both the cartoon and Dreamwave comic universes, with the in-universe rationale that the black hole was warping reality, collapsing the universes together, thereby explaining the continuity errors that existed between the Cybertron cartoon and its predecessors. It was during Cybertron's run that Aaron Archer first coined the collective name UNICRON Trilogy to refer to all three series, for the pivotal influence that Unicron had on each one. Cybertron would wind to a close in late 2006, bringing a definitive end to both the trilogy and to an entire generation of Transformers. The next year, the live-action movie would arrive to catapult the brand to worldwide juggernaut status, and all subsequent cartoons have been Hasbro-driven, the co-production of the trilogy a thing of the past, its constant influx of new characters for the most part replaced with a stable, repeating cast of reimagined classic favorites. The fictional world of the Unicron trilogy hasn't really been revisited in any significant capacity in the last decade, but its characters and accomplishments haven't been forgotten. New toys of several Armada characters have been released in the Transformers Universe and Generations toy lines, with appearances in tie-in comics, and more still have popped up in cameo roles in comics, cartoons, and games. In particular, new incarnations of Armada's poster boy Hotshot have appeared in several series, including Transformers Animated, and in a leading role in the upcoming Rescue Bots Academy. The trilogy's handling of Unicron and Primus, and Cybertron's introduction of the ancient Transformer Vector Prime, were key to the development of the complex lore of the Transformers multiverse and the original 13 Primes. One of the most iconic elements of the whole trilogy, Minicons, are now a fixture of Transformers canon, with a particularly big marketing push in 2015's new Robots in Disguise series. And colony planets inspired by Cybertrons have become a key element of IDW Publishing's comic book universe. Today, only a handful of years away from the 20th anniversary of Armada, the generation of children who grew up on the Unicron trilogy are now adults themselves, with their own disposable income and even kids of their own that they want to share their version of Transformers with. And perhaps that means we'll soon see a return to the trilogy and its characters. But for now, it'll always be remembered as one of the most inventive, colorful, divisive periods in Transformers history. And those are the basics on the Unicron trilogy. Did you grow up with these series? Share your fond memories of your favorite show or character or toy gimmick in the comments. If you're not already, remember to subscribe for more from the world of the Transformers, and if you're in a position to do so, please consider supporting the basics on Patreon.